Juliet had come back in with the mail as Dr. Winters finished up her lunch. The Cobb salad was from the Taste of Cashmere, a diner in town that had been there for nearly as long as she had. The food there was the standard diner fare, but there was something about it that just kept bringing people back. The translucent strips mixed amongst the roughage was an addition on her part, and they were the very tasty remnants of Douglas Marsh's childhood trauma. It was these pinches of personality that made food truly enjoyable to her. "Anything good, Juliet?" she asked, as the woman came in and leafed through the letters. "Let's see, power bill, water bill, a reorder for your highlights magazine, and..." She paused on the last one and read the front again. "An invitation to the Cashmere Botanical Tree Lighting." Dr. Winters nodded, having expected it. Dr. Winters and the strange entity that ran the botanical gardens had a friendly sort of relationship, but to Winter, she was just one more unknown quantity in the often difficult-to-maintain town where she lived. She had so many pieces on the board already that the mysterious lady bore watching. She had power, that much was clear, but she seemed content to do some good in Winter's town while she did whatever it was that she was trying to do. "I suppose I should make sure I have something to wear," Winters said, as she finished up her salad and tossed it in the garbage. "Something festive," Juliet suggested, as she went to get a little coffee. "A lot of your wardrobe can be very..." She searched for a word that wouldn't insult her boss, but would also convey her feelings about her limited wardrobe. "Dark." Winter wouldn't deny that, and she thought about what she had and decided that she and Marguerite might need to find something to wear before the event. "What are we looking at this afternoon, Juliet?" "Well, at 1:30 you've got an appointment with Mr. Williams. 2:30 you have one with Mrs. Astor. Mrs. Jones will be here at 3, Mr. Douglas at 5, and your last appointment will be with the Chapels at 6. Winter nodded, leaving Juliet in the break room as she went to get ready for her first appointment. It was going to be another long afternoon. Sheriff Guthrie coughed as his sip of coffee lasted a little too long. The graveyard was blinking like an epileptic's worst nightmare, and what Earl had done could not have been sanctioned by the city. He had strung lights along the fence and across the roof of the gravekeeper's shack. That much was fine. The Santas and angels that he had put up on the tall, pointy fence that surrounded the graveyard were a little less tasteful, but also fine. If Earl wanted to festive up the place for Christmas, then so be it. The lights he had strung along the gravestones, however, were going a little too far. Guthrie pulled into the parking lot by the shack, and when Earl came out with a wave at him, he was a little envious of the steaming cup of whatever that he had in his hand. Guthrie was shivering in his old department-issue jacket, and he would need to request thicker ones when he got elected next year. These jackets were little better than windbreakers, and the deputies had already asked why they couldn't get better ones. "When you get elected?" came a craggy voice from behind him, but Guthrie ignored it. My, boy, putting the cart before the horse then, ain't you?" He didn't look. He knew who it was. The recently deceased Sheriff Masterson had been following him like Jacob Marley to Scrooge for the last 2 months, and he was becoming pretty tired of it. Yes, he had technically been responsible for the old sheriff's death, but He hadn't killed him or anything. It had been him or Masterson, and Guthrie had just chosen survival over loyalty. He didn't think that warranted the constant company of the man's spirit. "I don't give a 10 fig how you justify it, boy," Masterson growled. "You as good as killed me, and I'll haunt you until you're brought to justice." "Why don't you just pass on, you old spook?" Guthrie growled, and Earl must have heard him because he cocked his head. "What you say, Sheriff?" "I asked if you had a permit for desecrating those graves in such a fashion, Earl." Earl looked shocked. "Desecration? It's just Christmas lights, Sheriff." "Well, yes, City Code 445 says that you aren't supposed to hang anything like that on them. It gives easement for flowers and items left by the family of the deceased. Anything else, technically, counts as desecration, which, I might add, would probably get you 2 years in Arendelle, if you were lucky." The unspoken threat was that he might get 2 years in Stragview, which was as good as a death sentence sometimes. "Shit, Sheriff, I'm sorry. Let me get these down. I'm just trying to be festive." "Yeah, well, keep the festivities off the gravestones. It's disrespectful." Earl moved off, looking more sad than angry, and Guthrie felt bad about yelling at him. It wasn't his fault that a vengeful spirit had been riding Guthrie's ass since Halloween. He needed to calm down a little, but it was hard. He had a lot of responsibility on top of the haunting, and they were starting to feel like a millstone around his neck. Today had also been kind of a headache to boot. He'd had a call for a break-in right off the rip that turned out to be a false alarm. 2 reports of graffiti, some Green Man Lives crap behind the grocery store and on the drugstore alley wall, and the topper had been a shoplifter at Walmart that had run from him for about 20 minutes before a door greeter had clotheslined him. It was barely lunchtime, and Guthrie was already worn out. "Heavy is the head that wears the crown," said a snaky voice. "Maybe I could have told you as much." Guthrie climbed back into his cruiser and had just got it put into gear when he heard the call coming over the radio. 1032 at Cashmere Station. 1032 at Cashmere Station. All cars report." 1032, Guthrie thought. That meant someone was at the station with a gun. Of course, most of the people at the station had guns, but if they were calling it over the radio, then it meant that a suspect was there with a gun. There could be hostages, there could be wounded, and Guthrie flipped on the lights and sirens as he headed for the station house. Why today, of all days? He came blaring up the road, lights and sirens flaring, and he came out of his car with his gun at the ready as he climbed the stairs to the station door. "Don't move! Hands where I can—" Surprise! The station was decorated for Christmas. Tinsel and garland and paper Santas in attendance everywhere. The daytime deputies, Parks and Woods, and the night deputies, Ellis and Manx, and the daytime phone operator, Clara Haynes, looked mighty festive, and the food they had set out smelled extremely tasty. It all hit Guthrie like a wave, and it only served to make him angrier. It wasn't real anger. Most likely it was surprise that was slipping closer to frustration, but he let it spill out like water from an overflowing toilet onto the people who were smiling like they had pulled off something special. "What in the blue hell do you think you're doing?" Guthrie spouted, their smiles slipping a little. "It's a Christmas party, Sheriff," Clara said. "Then why didn't you just say that? Why did you call a code over the public bandwidth?" The deputies looked at each other. clearly not understanding, and that made Guthrie all the angrier. "You called a 1032. Do you know what that means?" The gun was still in his hand, and Guthrie had to work very hard to get it back in the holster before he did something stupid. "A 1032? Wood said. "That's the emergency code, Sheriff. We just wanted you to come back for emergency orders." 1032, Guthrie said through gritted teeth, "is for gunmen, and you just called and told me there was one right here in the station. How many times have I told you to learn your codes and not play around on the radio? How many times have I talked about playing around on the public bandwidth?" "Sheriff, we just..." "No," Guthrie said. "No, I need you to do better. I need all of you to do better." Guthrie shook his head and headed for his office, not being in the mood for any kind of party. "Sheriff, why not come in?" Carla asked, but he shook his head. "Enjoy your party. I'm not going to be good company right now." The door closed behind him like a denouncement, and the old ghost in his head chuckled as he dropped into the chair behind the large mahogany desk. "Heavy is the head," he chuckled, and Guthrie lit a cigarette as he got to the paperwork. He had too much on his plate already. "Do we really need one of these in the visitation room?" Assistant Warden Strauss chuckled as he watched the inmates setting up the usual collection of decorations, the boxes around the tree they had cut down near the old work-release building. Strauss liked to see the inmates in high spirits, as this detail undoubtedly was. Happy inmates were less likely to hang themselves or stab each other, and that caused a lot less problems for him. "Warden, we have this conversation every year, as I assume you had with A.W. Coontz before me. Less than 10% of the inmate population gets visitation, but the families that do come like to see a little festive air about the place. Christmas is a dark holiday for the incarcerated. Any joy we can give them is for the best in the long run." Strauss quoted visitation statistics like the warden wasn't aware of them. In truth, the warden made a habit of filling his prison with inmates who were less likely to have visitors. Stagview took almost double the amount of violent offenders, was one of the few death row facilities in the state, and received a federal grant every year for their work with challenging inmates, which was just another word for violent convicts. In fact, the people in Stagview, for the most part, had no families, or none that would associate with them. They were his to play with, and the warden damn sure knew it. "It's a needless expense and a needless frivolity," he said, watching the inmates begin on the tree. Strauss was right, though. The way their faces changed as they strung popcorn on strings, as they hung ornaments, and as they plugged in lights and made them wink was an odd transformation, to be sure. It brought these men back to some species of childhood, an odd bit of magic in a place like this. "Expense?" Strauss laughed. "We have used the same decorations for 15 years, I understand. The tree is from the woods, on our land, and was thus also free. We are out nothing." "Just an ounce of control," the warden said. "You who worry too much," Strauss said. "You should learn to let go. However, will you retire from this place?" The warden of Stagview smiled. "Not for many, many years to come." As the two of them watched the men setting up, Strauss smiled at their antics. The warden didn't find much to be entertained by. He didn't maintain this little honeypot so he could be entertained. His sister liked to snack on the memories that she pulled from the townsfolk. His brother, God, he hadn't thought of him in years, seemed to enjoy feasting on human suffering, but the warden liked to dine on something a little different. He took his strength from the fear that swirled around the prison like a fog. All this saccharine holiday cheer was a little sugary for his taste. "Warden," someone called from the door that led out to the compound, and as it came open, both men squinted against the harsh midday sun. The warden shaded his eyes and looked at the outline of this new player until it congealed into Sergeant Hall. Hall was a recent promote, and he seemed to be doing well, though he was a little excitable for the warden's taste. He was emitting a fine bouquet of apprehension now, and that let the old devil know that something was going on. "What seems to be the problem, Hall?" he asked, ever the politician. I don't know. The sergeant told me he needed you in confinement immediately. There was a noise in the background, a weird slamming sound, and he said you would know what to do." "Was it a kicking noise? Do you not have a captain who can handle spirited inmates?" Sergeant Hall swallowed. He said he needed you specifically, sir. I thought it best to come fetch you." The warden turned to A.W. Strauss and shrugged. "Seems that duty calls. Can you handle this festive detail on your own, Assistant Warden Strauss?" "Of course," said Strauss, "unless you need me to come with you." "No need," the warden said, heading for the door with Sergeant Hall in tow. "I have no doubt that this is just some misunderstanding." "Well, well, look who it is." I knew that voice anywhere, and I looked up into the smiling face of Marcus and his grandfather. I'd seen them more often these days, and had even gone out to the house a few times to have a meal or a drink. There were definitely a few of Grandpa's stories that I wanted to turn into parts of my book, but the more I heard, the more notes Marcus showed me, the more I thought this might be its own book. More than that, though, the two had become my friends, and I was thankful to have met them. "What brings you back today?" I asked, as I saved my charts for later. "Didn't I just see you guys Monday?" "Yeah," Marcus said, "but someone can't seem to shake their cough, so we had to come and see his doctor so we could get more albuterol." "Oh, pish-posh. But he started coughing a bit then and kind of ruined the illusion. But we came to talk to you about this tree lighting thingamy at the botanical gardens tomorrow." I thought about it, nodding as I remembered the posters I'd seen. I'd heard about it, but I figured I'd go this weekend. "Well," Marcus said, "Gramps and I got special invitations, and we wondered if you wanted to come as our guest." "I'd love to, but wouldn't your fiancé be a better choice for this? I can tell you from experience that they usually take it personally when you don't invite them to parties." "Well, the invitation says that we can both bring a +1, so by that logic, we have 2 extras. Glimmer can come, too, so that my grandson doesn't end up in the doghouse." "In that case, sure, I'd love to go. What's the dress code?" "Sunday casual, but dress warmly because it's supposed to be chilly." I nodded. "That tracks for this time of year. I suppose I'll meet you guys at the gate then." 6 o'clock. Don't be late. You'll have to hang out with the rabble," Grandpa said with a wink. "Oh, I'll be there. Thanks for thinking of me. I really appreciate this," I said, feeling honored. They hadn't known me very long, and it was quite nice to be invited along like well, like a friend. I was coming to understand that to them, people who stood with them in the heat of battle were considered more than friends, and it had brought me into their circle, quickly and seamlessly. The two of them took their leave, and I got back to work. It appeared I'd be too busy tomorrow night to think much about overtime. There was a knock at the door, and Guthrie sighed as he told them to come on in. The sound of Christmas music came humming in from the door, and he heard the sound of Carla's heels on the wood floor as she came into his office. She set a plate down on the table, and Guthrie could have gratefully kissed her. Ribs, potato salad, a couple of burgers, and even a slice of cake. It was more than he deserved after yelling at them, but Carla knew the stress he was under and didn't hold it against him. "We thought you might like some food, even if you won't join the party." "Thanks. Hey, I'm sorry about earlier. I was surprised was all. I came in expecting trouble and, well, I told them not to play around on the radio. 100... "I know," Carla said, cutting him off. They aren't used to being under this kind of scrutiny. Be patient with them. They're good guys. They just need some work." "They were always good for me," whispered that skeletal voice. "But I never asked them to be anything but good old boy law enforcers." "I know," Guthrie said, over the voice of his old boss. I don't think they realize how serious this is. This isn't just fun times. We could all be in a lot of trouble for their unprofessionalism." Carla shook her head. "You're just a different man than Masterson's was." "That's for sure," came the man in question. I'm just trying to keep them above board," Guthrie said, looking at Carla hopefully, wanting her to understand. "Just be patient with them," she said, smiling. "They're trying." She left then, her heels clacking on the boards, as she left Guthrie with his ghosts. "You sure you're up to this, Gramps?" Marcus asked, as they drove home. The sky looked treacherous, and he felt like it could snow at any moment. "Of course," Grandpa said, coughing into his handkerchief. "I wouldn't miss it for the world. It's been ages since I've rubbed elbows with the Fae, and I had hoped to manage it again before I died." "You don't," Marcus said, but he stomped on the brakes as the crossing guard held her sign out with no small amount of agitation. "You don't think it'll be like last year, do you?" The kids scuttled across the road in their jackets and winter boots, and when the road was clear and the crossing guard had given Marcus one more withering look, he proceeded on. "Let's hope not," Grandpa said with a chuckle. "I think I've only got a couple of more throwdowns like that left in me." Marcus thought about the hospital and the Moon Elves court and the battle at the garden the year before, and realized that he might be the one defending Grandpa this year if it came to it. His powers had grown substantially in the last year, but he still doubted that he was anywhere near as strong as Grandpa. The way he had fought the ghost girl a few weeks ago had left Marcus speechless, and he hoped one day that he could match that kind of display. "All the same, we better come prepared, not just for the winter night, but also for whatever else might be there. Fays and demons and whatever else this town can throw our way. Not to mention we'll have John with us, so he can tell us if the spirit world decides to show up." You don't think..." "I think," Grandpa cut in, "that I intend to go and have some of that delicious cider that I had last year, dance with pretty elf girls, and have the last hurrah of my long life. I suggest you do the same, but keep an ear peeled for trouble. Glimmer will be with us too, so we'll be as prepared as we can be." As Marcus pulled into the driveway, he certainly hoped so. The warden swirled the alcohol in his glass as he leaned against the rail of the tower's catwalk. Something was happening here, and the warden didn't like it. He had followed Sergeant Hall to confinement, where he found the last person he expected to find there. Sergeant Mobley was one of the oldest guards in his employ, and, as far as he knew, only worked nights. The daytime sergeant, a kid named Kiln, was standing at the window and looking into the pitch-black quad like there might be a monster in there. His eyes were wide as Mobley's had been on the night that it had all happened, all those years ago. As it happened, there was a monster in that quad, and the warden was suddenly wondering if Mobley had told him about it. The old sergeant knew better. He had been warned, but when a loud boom came from the wall of that dark quad, the warden realized that he hadn't had to say anything. "What the hell is going on here?" the warden hissed, looking at Mobley. "There's something in the quad. It's like a cougar or something, and it's ripping the place apart," Kiln squawked. The glass shuddered again, but whatever was hitting it kept moving back out of sight as it did. Long cracks were appearing in the plexiglass, but they were on the layer inside. It hadn't made it through the second or third layer yet, and that was to be expected. The glass was over a foot thick, and even these creatures would have a hard time getting through it. "Kiln," Mobley said, "why don't you go down there with your guys? Tell them not to do anything foolish until it starts to come through the glass." Kiln nodded, looking back at the warden before running out of the station and heading for the floor. With the younger sergeant gone, Mobley turned his unsettling attention to the warden. Mobley was an old man, too old for a job like this. Corrections was a young man's game, but Mobley refused to retire. Maybe if this thing escaped, he would finally leave, but for the warden, that day couldn't come fast enough. He had forgotten his place. That look said so, and it also told him that the old man didn't care. "You tell me," Mobley said, looking away from the glass. "You pull all the strings in this place, don't you, boss?" The warden bristled. "I don't like your tone, Mobley. You might want to check it before you find something worse than a monster." Mobley scoffed, turning back to the glass as the thing hit it and fled again. "So you know about as much as we do. I don't know if that's more or less comforting. What I know is that creature, who's been quiet for decades, has suddenly started to try for an escape. Why is that, do you think?" Mobley shrugged. "How should I know?" "Because, Sergeant, you've made it your business to know. You've stood guard against this creature since it killed your friends. Whether that's out of some sense of guilt or because you want to make sure it doesn't happen again, I don't know. But I want to know why this is happening." Mobley only shrugged. "I can see only one reason why it would risk daylight to escape its home." The warden waited for a little, and when he didn't answer, the ruler of this place of shadows took the bait. "And what could that be?" "Someone's calling it," Mobley stated. The warden left not long after that, telling Mobley to call him if anything changed. Now he was standing on the catwalk, looking out at the forest that stretched beyond the limits of his eye. The warden wondered who could be calling such a creature. "Perhaps I've already been warned about it," the warden whispered, remembering a certain message that he had been given just before the work release center was closed forever. As twilight fell over the woods outside of Stragview, a lone figure walked through them. How many years had it been since he escaped that hateful edifice? 1, 2, somewhere in between, he imagined. He glanced at the sky and winced as something cold and wet hit his face. He reached up to catch the falling bit of chilliness and discovered that it was snowing again. It hadn't snowed in a while, not since last Halloween, and it felt like it had been only yesterday. He had been busy since his escape, so busy. He nearly had everything he needed to take down that hateful construct, but there was still work to do. He looked through the trees at the tower that rose above the wall of the prison. Could the warden be up there? Could he be watching the woods even now? Didn't matter. The warden would know about him before long. He and his new friends. He could feel them gathering around him. His pack. There was one trapped inside the prison, too. He had been calling to it. He knew that soon it would join him. He couldn't destroy the prison, though, not with just the help of his pack. He would need her help. He would need Jessie to discover her power. Soon, he whispered, disappearing back into the trees with his new friends. He had nothing but time, after all. Guthrie heard his keys jingle in the lock of his trailer as he stepped inside. It had been a long day, but thankfully, it had been mostly uneventful. No more senseless crimes, no more nonsense, and Guthrie had finished his mountain of paperwork and ignored the voice of his predecessor. Now, however, it seemed he wouldn't be able to ignore him. "Welcome home, temporary sheriff." Guthrie sighed, hanging his belt on the hook by the door and sliding the gun he wore into his pocket as he went to put it in the safe in his bedroom. "Look, I've had a long day. Maybe you could take a night off or something." He came back into the little kitchen to find Masterson, or the rotting corpse of him, still sitting at the table with a couple of glasses and a bottle of Guthrie's whiskey. "Oh, now what kind of vengeful spirit would I be if I just let you be?" Guthrie thought about just climbing under the covers and ignoring this undead menace, but decided that it might be time to face him. "Why are you bothering me, Masterson? You know I didn't kill you. Not really. At best, I just let you die. Chose to live rather than die, so why are you hounding me?" Masterson's rotted lips pulled up in a smile as he took the glass and drank deeply. "That's the problem, Guthrie. You think I'm a figment of your imagination, some kind of manifestation of your guilt. But I'm not. I am who I claim to be, and the quicker you figure that out, the quicker you can be rid of me." Guthrie looked at the glass, and after speculating about how a figment of his imagination could have poured actual booze into his tumbler, he took a sip and grimaced. His finest whiskey was little better than rot gut, but there wasn't much to be had in this mudhole of a town. It was either pay upward for liquor that he couldn't handle, or drink the stuff that people made in the backwoods that was also often too much for him to handle. This stuff was the latter, and he shuddered as he tapped the side of the glass for more. "Burns like coal oil, don't it?" "You mentioned something about getting rid of you," Guthrie said, not rising to the sally. "You see, Guthrie, as much as I want to blame you for my current state of affairs, you are correct. You aren't completely responsible for my death, but you were a part of it. If you want to be rid of me, then you have to bring these people to justice." "And who are these people?" Guthrie asked, taking a sip and shuddering through the fire. "What was your first kill like, Guthrie?" The question took the temporary sheriff by surprise, and he coughed a little in the middle of another sip. "Excuse me?" "Oh, come on," said the old spook, taking a sip of his own. "Don't get shy on me now. You know mine. I'm sure they told you all about it. I shot those bootleggers when I was just a deputy. We crept up on them while they were tending their still, probably some of the last in the county by that point. To be sure, though, they drew on me first. If they'd just surrendered, I'd have been happy to take them in. 1968 that was. How about you, Guthrie? When was the first time you drew blood?" "What are you, some kind of deranged Jacob Marley, here to show me the ghosts of deaths past, present, and yet to come?" Masterson laughed and sounded like gravel in an old mug. "Perhaps. Maybe I just want to make you think before you acquire yourself another vengeful spirit." "I believe we were talking about getting rid of you," Guthrie said, leaning closer to the spirit than he strictly wanted to. "And if you want to continue talking about it, I suggest you humor me," Masterson drawled, taking a long sip before refilling his cup. "Now, your first kill, who was it?" Guthrie took a huge sip, coughing and shuddering as he tried to get his thoughts under control. First kill. It was something lawmen often thought about. You didn't spend time on the road, especially not in a big town, without having to draw your weapon with intent. If you were a cop for long enough, someone was going to make you draw. They either didn't like what you had done, they didn't agree with your judgment, or they just didn't like the shield. It wasn't bootleggers, unfortunately. No, mine was a little less grand than all that. "Do tell," Masterson said, refilling his glass. "We were responding to a mugging. Something simple. When the guy told us that the mugger had gone down the alley at the end of the row, my partner and I decided to check it out. Well, there wasn't a mugger down there, but there was someone. They lunged out of a dark spot between the two alleys, coming out at my partner as he went past, and saw the knife about a second before it would have been in him. I didn't think. I just shot. I put two in her, my partner wincing as he turned around, but the deed was done by then. She, because it had been a she, fell down dead with a hole right between her eyes. That was my first, but it wasn't my last." Masterson smiled rottenly. "No, I guess it wasn't, was it? Because one of those times brought you to our little town, didn't it?" Guthrie looked away, but it was all the answer that Masterson needed. "Who was it, Guth? Who did you kill that was bad enough to make you leave the big city?" Guthrie didn't answer. The whiskey was starting to play hell with his head, and he wasn't sure he could control his tongue for much longer. Guthrie had just wanted a little drink before bed, something to chase the empty devils from his mind, but this was threatening to slip into a full-blown drunk. He'd be miserable tomorrow, and the town's business wasn't getting any less dicey. He knew he shouldn't, but when the ghoul offered him another knock, he took it. Sobriety and regret were for tomorrow. Tonight, he was drinking with the dead. It was something they told me to leave alone, but I couldn't let it be. I had another hard-ass boss, kind of like you, but maybe not as clean as you. We knew about some people peddling high-end drugs, pharmaceuticals, and worse, but we'd been told to let it lay. The people involved were a little young for it, just college kids, and one of them was connected. His dad was a senator, one of Georgia's finest, and we were told that if we harassed his son, there would be trouble. My boss said the same, that we could arrest the normal people, but that we were not to mess with the son. That didn't sit right with me. I figured if we could just catch him with enough dope on him, then the judge would have to see what he was about. We arrested him more than once in raids, but it never mattered. His dad always bought him out of it, and I ate reprimand after pink slip after write-up after verbal order to cease and desist. I didn't stop, though. One night, I caught him dead to rights. I caught him with enough stuff to stock several gangs, and instead of asking me what I meant to do about it, he drew a gun on me. Maybe he was high. Maybe he was just tired of being chased, but he was a lousy shot. I shot him twice before he could even pull the trigger, and that was something that Daddy couldn't buy him out of. They wanted to arrest me, but I had body cam footage, and what could they say? I was told to leave, to go, to never come back, or else someone might draw a little faster the next time I had a gun pulled on me. Masterson nodded, drinking deeply before sighing and putting it down again. I guess I knew some of that. Your boss told us you were a good cop, but you had too many enemies. Guess I took that to mean that you were someone who couldn't leave well enough alone. The fact that he didn't blackball you should have told me what I needed to know, but I guess I preferred to hear it from you. You could have just asked, Guthrie said. And so I have, Masterson said, grinning at his one-time deputy. Guthrie had to steel himself against a shudder as a roach scampered across his lips and into a hole in his cheek. Now, Guthrie said, are we done with this yet? I would like to get back to the one more, if you'll entertain me, Masterson said. And you will entertain me, Guthrie. If you ever hope to be rid of me, boyo, you will entertain me and suffer me and put me to rest. It's the least you can do, hey, killer? Guthrie growled under his breath. The old corpse was right. He would suffer just about anything to be rid of this old spook. So, and this one's for all the marbles, so be sure you answer me true. Who told you about this place? Guthrie knit his brows together. What does that matter? It matters a whole awful lot, kid. It matters because Cashmere ain't the sort of place you just walk into. It's special, if you hadn't realized it yet. It's special because not a lot of people find their way here. And that's just how we like it. People who do are usually helped, and the list of people who help other people find this place is very short. So, who told you where to find Cashmere? Guthrie thought about it for a moment, letting the whiskey slosh in his glass as he swirled it. How How had he heard about this place? Guthrie had been living here for years, half a decade at least, and he had never once questioned why he had come here. This was a podunk little town, and not exactly a career hotspot. Why had he just decided to blow into town to start from scratch? Because of the drunk, he said finally, remembering that night and realizing that it had all been because of him. A drunk? The old ghoul rasped. Yeah. When I shot the kid, they put me in a holding cell. Kid's dad was furious, mad enough to shoot me himself, but I had found his son in the middle of a crime after all, and there wasn't much they could say about that. While they deliberated, I sat in there feeling sorry for myself. As I sat, this old drunk a little way down kept yelling, "Cashmere, Cashmere," he said again and again. "Not quite to Jeremiah, past Tiger, and all there a man could want. That's the place for a tramp like me. Somewhere to hide, somewhere to think, somewhere to remember." He said it again and again and again till I thought I was going to go crazy. By the time my lieutenant came down there, the drunk's declaration was marching around my head like a soldier off to war. He handed me my personal effects and told me to be out of town by sunset. If you aren't, I can't promise you won't end up in the morgue, he told me. There's a very angry father that's likely to take what he considers justice into his own hands. If you get on somewhere, I'll vouch for your work ethic, but I suggest you make it far from here. You're a good cop, Guthrie, but you just don't seem to know when to leave well enough alone. He rolled the door, and out I went. I never looked back either. It's how I came to be here, Masterson, and it seems like it might have been more trouble than it was worth the longer I'm here. Masterson nodded, knocking back the last of the whiskey, and rucked his chair back on its hind legs. There are people in this town that know about what happens in the woods. One is the mayor. One is the warden at the prison. 3 of them sit on the board of the hospital. And the last is the head shrinker. She, most of all, knows why those woods are so dangerous. It's got something to do with that hole, and I want to know what it is. Don't you know? Guthrie said. You had the sign. Didn't they tell you what it was for? Masterson shook his head, his neck creaking sickeningly. Nope. They just told me that the sigil would keep me safe when I was about their business. I don't know any more than you do about that hole, but when you become sheriff, you'll be able to find out all sorts of things. And then you can figure out how to do something about it. Till then, I'll hang around and give you a poke now and then, so you don't forget who you're working for, kiddo. Guthrie shook his head and got up. He had to work at 0600, and he was going to have a hell of a hangover. For what it's worth, Masterson said, stopping him, the more I find out about you, the more I believe that you would make a fine sheriff. I may have been too hard on you, boy, but that don't change the fact that you as good as killed me. Whatever your intentions, my blood is on your hands. Guthrie didn't say anything. He took himself to bed, slamming the door behind him as his final word on the matter. Masterson didn't bother him that night, and he was What do you think, Maggie? How do I look?" Dr. Pamela Winters was standing in front of the mirror in her bedroom, looking at herself and trying to decide if the red dress was too much. She had a green stole to pair it with, Christmas colors, and liked the way it looked. She didn't have much of a head for normal fashion. That was still foreign to her, even after all this time, but she knew that there would be expectations if she was to go to the tree lighting tonight. The invitation hadn't specifically stated it, but this wasn't a town function. This would be a formal event, something involving entities from all over, and she would be representing the town. The mayor and Sheriff Guthrie could pretend that they ran Cashmere all they liked, but at the end of the day, this was her town. "Très magnifique," Maggie said, as she came out of the bathroom in her towel. A second towel was being used to dry her hair, and it hung down in dark sheets as she got ready for bed. Maggie didn't really sleep, neither did Winter for that matter, but she had to stay out of the sun because of her condition. It wasn't quite as dramatic as they always portrayed it in the movies, but Maggie would be vulnerable if she stayed in the sun for too long, and it could make her very sick. "Thank you," Winter said, turning in the mirror and looking at the way the dress moved and hugged her. "It's for tonight. We've been invited to the tree lighting at the Botanical Gardens." Marguerite lifted an eyebrow. "It is very fancy for a town event, mi amor. Are you sure you would not prefer something less formal?" "Well, the invitation says we're invited to an event after the lighting, so it'll likely be something less local and more opulent." Maggie raised an eyebrow. "Let us hope it is not as interesting as last year. I do not think even your dress could survive such a melee." Winter laughed. We could be so lucky, I suppose. It isn't every day that you get to meet the creatures of Aether." "Thankfully," Maggie said, taking up her brush as her hair finally came dry, "I will make sure my own dress does not clash. We want to look our best for the Lady of Summer." Winter smiled, slipping out of her dress and putting on her usual pantsuit and sensible heels. She couldn't very well see Patience in something like that. Most patients already thought her bills were too high, and they wouldn't trust a therapist who showed up wearing a runway model dress. "Get some rest, my love," she said, putting on her earrings before bending down to kiss Maggie on the cheek. "You'll need it for tonight." "I will break out the bag of A-positives so I am not tempted to snack," she said with a smile. Winter thanked her and told her that she would see her after work. Tonight was going to be trying, but likely a lot of fun to boot. "Well, Glimmer says she's in. She'll meet us at the garden. There is a detachment of moon elves going anyway, so she'll be traveling with them." Grandpa was trying to get a stain out of his leather duster, something that could be blood or could be ectoplasm at this point, and he held it up to the light before hitting it with a brush again. He had paired it with some church clothes, comfort over style, and some battered-looking dress shoes. I had managed to do a little better, a button-up and some dress pants, but I'd been cleaning my coat as well. The leather long coat was far from formal, but they had kind of become our sign of office. Also, they were warm, and it was likely to be chilly after dark, and also, the leather was worked with runes and sigils to stop anything smaller than a mortar shell. They were functional and practical, and damn if they weren't a little stylish, too.
"That's good. If the moon children are there, then certain elements might be unlikely to try anything."
"You really think he's going to try anything this time of year again?" Grandpa looked up as if to say, duh, and went back to cleaning his coat. "Gramps, I think he learned his lesson last year, and we've grown since then. We've got new allies, and I've got a better handle on my powers. I think he'd be a fool to try anything this soon." Grandpa rolled his eyes.
"Son, things like the Green Man don't just rest on their defeat. They've lived since before you were born, since before I was born, and will continue to live long after you and I and Glimmer and anyone else we know are gone. Critters like that don't dwell on defeat. They seethe on revenge. if he can break up this party, I think he will. I don't know how, but I truly believe that he will." I nodded, having to defer to his knowledge on this one. "You sure that going in loaded for bear isn't going to piss him off worse?"
"Nah. Most of these things look at the kind of power we have like we look at kids with Nerf guns. They don't consider us dangerous until we make them. And if they start trouble, then we will certainly be making some of them notice us."
I thought that over as I got my stuff together for tonight. We would see how it went, I supposed. "Good morning, Dr. Winters." Dr. Winters jumped a little. She hadn't expected anyone to be here this early, but she supposed that was what she had hired the cleaning woman for. Jennifer had been an interesting find, and she hadn't been so sure that she would work out. She had asked her for work while Pamela had been out on one of her jaunts, something that was becoming less and less often, and her little sign had said that she was willing to work for food. Pamela had offered her money, but the woman had staunchly protested. "I don't want any handouts, ma'am. I want to work for my keep. It'll be getting cold soon, and I need to get off the street." Winter had asked her why she wouldn't simply take the money, but Jennifer said that it wouldn't be fair. Pamela had asked if she had any family that she could stay with, but Jennifer had said she was alone. So, Dr. Winters had offered her a job, a home, and a new life. The woman had been hesitant, but Pamela had assured her that she knew of a place and a job where she could be happy. She had been cleaning the office twice a day, once in the morning and once in the evening, since the 1st of November, and Winter had secured her a room at a nearby place for as long as she needed it. The little room was just that, but it was warm, and it was hers. Jennifer never failed to tell her how grateful she was for the opportunity, and Winter was just happy that she didn't have to take out her own garbage anymore. Juliet was a good receptionist, but she left a lot to be desired when it came to housekeeping. "Good morning, Jennifer," she said, coming in and walking to the back to take her coat off. It was too early for Juliet. Her receptionist was still likely in bed for another half hour, but Winter liked to get in early and prepare the tea before the day got started. There wasn't a lot of prep work, but it was something that Winter enjoyed. "I've just finished with the rooms. I'm just getting the trash out, and then I'll be out of your hair." "You're never in my hair," Winter assured her. "Would you like some tea? I would feel bad sending you off in the cold without offering you something warm." "You send me off into a new home with money in my pocket. I would say that's enough, but I would gladly take some tea." Winter nodded and moved into the kitchenette to begin her preparation for the day. Jennifer came on behind her, straightening and cleaning as the good doctor prepared her tea for the day. She didn't mix any of the special tea for her housekeeper, though she supposed that the woman's memories would be tasty indeed. She looked as though she had lived a rich life, a full life, before she was unceremoniously turned out of whatever that entailed. She was a good woman, and Pamela was glad to help her. Winter was glad to have someone competent enough to clean the place and keep it up enough so that the clients didn't complain. Dr. Pamela Winters often found herself of two minds about things, but both halves were glad to have the woman in their employ. "So what are your plans for the holidays, Miss Jennifer? Do you have any family that you need to go see?" "I don't. My plans were to stay here and have a nice dinner, unless you need me to clean those days." No, we'll be closed till Monday. I only meant that, well, if you needed time off, I would be happy to pay for your lodging while you're gone." She shook her head. "No, ma'am, I'll be here if you need me." She took a sip of her tea, making a pleasing noise as the warm ginger wafted over her. "I was watching a TV show on UFOs." She always pronounced it UFOs. "And I was curious if there'd ever been any around here. They seem to go around areas of a lot of strangeness, and this place is pretty strange sometimes." Dr. Winters almost laughed. "No, Jennifer. If aliens have ever come here, I've never seen them." Jennifer shrugged. "Oh, well, I guess I'll just have to keep an eye on the skies." They talked a little more, and Jennifer thanked her for the tea before grabbing up the garbage and taking her leave.
I'll be back this afternoon to clean up after closing time, unless you would rather I come earlier. No, take the afternoon off, with pay. I'll be closing up early today anyway. I've got to go to a tree lighting ceremony. Thank you, ma'am. I'll see you tomorrow morning then. Enjoy your tree lighting. She was almost out the door when Pamela thought of something. Jennifer, would you like to go to the tree lighting? Most of the town will be there, and it would give you an opportunity to mingle a little. Jennifer smiled, but shook her head. I really haven't got anything extra for tickets to the gardens. One day I'd like to go. It sounds lovely, but I'm still kind of living hand to mouth. What if I left you a ticket? Pamela asked. Would you use it? Oh, I couldn't ask you to do that. You aren't. I'm offering. I might leave one for Juliet, too, as a Christmas present, for all your hard work. Jennifer smiled. In that case, I'd be glad to. I'll see you tonight, then. Merry Christmas, Dr. Winters. She headed out the front door, and Winter heard Juliet greet her in passing. Winter cleaned up her things and prepared for the day. It was going to be a long day, to be certain. The call that roused the warden came about 9, and by then it was too late to do much more than look at evidence. It was Mobley, because of course it was. It's gone, he said, and he didn't sound very happy about it. Probably got away sometime in the middle of the night. Why was I only told of this now? I told you to call me when something changed. Come have a look and I'll fill you in. Then he hung up on him. He hung up on the warden of Stragview. The warden was fuming by the time he came down to the gates of confinement, but if Mobley or any of the other officers cared, they didn't show it. They clearly thought they had seen something much worse than the warden, and they might even have been right. He had never been afraid of the creatures that lived in the woods around the prison, but they had always stayed in their place, except for this one. The warden didn't know what to make of this now, but he supposed that this was a bridge to be crossed another time. Mobley led him to the back wall of Quad 2, where there should have been a window. There was a hole. Something had broken the concrete there, smashing through it like a wrecking ball. But they hadn't come away unscathed. There was a black, tarish substance on the wall, and as the sun hit it, the black ooze began to sizzle. There was a bit of skin as well, the same black flesh that he had seen on the creature, and the warden could understand why they were only now letting him know. Post vehicles found it around sunrise. I guess it was hard for them to see before the sun came up. If he broke out last night, we never heard it. The warden bent down and touched some of the blood. It was cold and wet, even as it steamed, and he shook it off his fingers. It did not lie happily on his skin, and the texture was too familiar for his liking. You expect me to believe that you didn't hear this creature bursting through a concrete wall? Mobley shrugged. We heard something, but when we didn't see it trying to force its way through the glass or the back door, we assumed it was simply raging again. We didn't know it was gone until it was gone, and we would have called you sooner if we had. The warden wanted to argue the point, but saw nothing to be gained from it. He looked at the nearby stretch of fence and found it intact, both sections, and he supposed that that was a mercy. He would have to put the place on lockdown otherwise, and it could take days to get it fixed. He didn't have the time for that today, not this week either, and it was going to take time and money to get this hole fixed already. At least we can finally open all 4 quads of confinement, he thought, and that was certainly something. Go home, Mobley. Your shift ended hours ago. Sure, Mobley said, but the warden didn't think he would. He never actually logged his overtime anyway. So if Mobley wanted to waste his time working off the books, then so be it. The warden had other obligations to get ready for, like this tree lighting that he would be going to later. Must maintain good relations with the other factions, he whispered to himself as he climbed back into the tower. The fact that there could be other more powerful factions there
Some of these fairies that he'd heard so much about had not escaped his notice either. Also, he was certain that his sister would be there, and what a joyous reunion that would be. The crowd outside the botanical gardens was thick as flies. It was a motley collection of townies and Christmas sweaters and jeans, long coats and thick jackets, boots and sneakers, and all of them with steaming mugs of hot chocolate from an industrious truck that had been set up on the edge of the parking lot. The Christmas trees poked over the wall of the park, a group of silent sentinels just waiting, and the people outside milled about anxiously. They all remembered the Halloween display and were anxious to see what the garden had in store for them this year. They wouldn't have to wait for long. I looked up as someone called my name, and I saw the familiar trio of Marcus, Grandpa, and Glimmer standing by the gate, and I raised my own greeting. "Right on time," Marcus said, extending a hand to shake.
It's good to see you again, John.
Marcus looked at her strangely, chuckling a little as she turned to look back at him.
What?
Nothing. I just assumed he'd get a nickname too, I guess.
Not everyone gets a special name, Hunter. John can have one when he earns one.
Marcus laughed, shaking his head as he took her by the arm, and they went inside. Grandpa cackled as the two headed into the park.
"They make a lovely couple. I hope I live to see them wed."
I fell in beside him as the two of us headed inside, the older man limping a bit as we looked at the trees. "Is that a concern?" I asked, looking up and thinking they were kind of plain.
"At my age, a hard sneeze could do it. I'm old, John. Hopefully you make it there yourself one day. Then you'll understand. Hopefully, though, I've got many years left to me. Don't doubt. You all won't get rid of me that easy."
He started coughing a little then, ruining the illusion, and I stopped to let him finish. He wiped a hand across his mouth.
Just a little late on my evening breathing treatment, that's all,"
he assured me. I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say, and when he was ready, we moved on. The congregation of townies was moving towards the back of the park, and we fell in with them as Marcus and Glimmer slowed down to wait for us. It was a pretty good turnout for what amounted to a Christmas tree lighting in a small town, and the deeper we went, the more festivities unfurled. There was a gingerbread house all decked out with lights, some large candy canes that I thought must be real by the way they were sweating, and a bunch of those hairy people dressed as nutcrackers and ballerinas and other Christmas characters. They looked ridiculous, like satyrs from Greek myth, but they were nothing compared to the little whatevers that were dressed as elves. These squat little creatures were walking around in bright-colored garb, growling at people who got too close, and generally being a surly little group of strangeness. I chuckled, enjoying the little holiday show before Grandpa leaned in and whispered to me,
"You can see them too, can't you?"
I looked down, suddenly shivering, with a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. Are they
ghosts? No, but they are under a glamour. Normal people just see normal people, men and women in costumes, but those of us who can see through the veils and glamours can see them for what they really are."
"And what are they?" I asked, smiling at a pair of them that were dressed as gingerbread men.
"The lady called them Brandylow. They look a little like the goat men from the old stories, but they appear to be people that she has made into something more with her power. They follow her dutifully enough, like chicks to a mother hen, and she leads them. The little ones are gnomes, nasty little blighters, but they seem to love her enough not to hurt people. They're harmless enough as long as they're on your side. Be careful, though, if you see anything out and about.
Things that hide themselves don't usually like being noticed, and they might react badly if they realize that you can see 'em too." I nodded, tucking that away as I headed deeper into the park.
It's all so wondrous. I am always so enchanted by you humans and your winter celebration.
I've seen the cave you live in, Glim. It's not exactly drab.
Yes, but we don't really do things like this. The winter is often a time for sadness, and festivals are usually saved for the spring for those who are left.
Remind me to send you back with some canned goods, Marcus added quietly. Glimmer started to say something, but suddenly her skin seemed to buzz like a cell phone. It was a little dizzying to watch, and when she turned around, her lips were pulled back in a feral snarl. This was the hunter that fed the village. This was the warrior that protected them. And, if needed, she would do it again.
Something is here. Something is not right.
She pulled Marcus behind her, dropping a hand to her knife, and I turned with Grandpa to see the therapist? I knew who Dr. Winters was. She came to the hospital to do psychiatric evaluations sometimes, but she had traded her pantsuit and sensible shoes for a long red and green dress that looked more at home in the current setting. Her date was no less beautiful, a pale woman in a dark blue dress that looked like old ice inside a glacier. The two had stopped about 30 feet from us, Dr. Winters vibrating in a similar fashion, and when Grandpa put a hand out, Glimmer settled a little at his touch, and it was a welcome relief.
"Why, Dr. Winters, so good of you to join us," Grandpa said, smiling wetly. "Almost feels like deja vu."
Dr. Winters settled herself and returned the smile. "Good to see you, old man, and your apprentice, too, along with this charming creature."
"Oh, this is Glimmer. She's my apprentice's betrothed and a hunter for the moon elves that live here in the mountains."
"A pleasure to make your acquaintance," Dr. Winters said. "Haven't seen a moon elf in a while. It's good to see you haven't been wiped out. They're fine warriors, and the world is better for their presence." That seemed to unbristle her a little, and as the woman and her escort fell in with us, she introduced her. "This is Marguerite, my partner. I think some of you have met." "I don't think we had a lot of time for pleasantries last time," Marcus said. "Last time we saw each other, we were both fighting for our lives, as I recall." Marguerite smiled at him. "Let's make this gathering a little less hectic, yes?" I wanted to ask what they were talking about, but we had come to the place, it seemed. We came to a frozen lily pond, the lilies stuck in suspension beneath the ice, and standing on the surface, her pale blue gown seeming to float, was the loveliest woman I had ever seen. She was simultaneously young and middle-aged all at once, looking girlish as well as seasoned, beautiful and graceful, a woman of undeterminable age that time had been kind to. She was flanked by 3 of the furry satyr people Gramps had called Brandylow, and they wore togas. One had a red stole, one had a green stole, and the third wore a blue stole, something I assumed was a mark of office. "Welcome, friends and neighbors. We're so glad to have you at our first official tree lighting ceremony." The townies clapped, and we joined them lustily enough. "Without further ado, I bring you the lighting." She raised her hands, and suddenly the rows and rows of pine trees were covered in lights. The boughs sprouted ornaments, candy canes, and strings of popcorn and tinsel. The lights blazed in so many colors that it was almost eye-watering. Suddenly the world was on fire, awash with lights, and even the most jaded of the townsfolk looked on in wonder at the spectacle. I had to admit it was quite a show, almost like magic, but after what I had seen at the hospital, it was little more than a parlor trick. Despite that, even Grandpa looked amazed. It took 50 years off of him,
so he only looked about 100. Enjoy this evening's festivities, everyone. Those who are coming to the event to follow, please join me on the ice. As the crowd dispersed, our party approached the frozen lake with the good doctor in tow. Another form moved up from the left on its own in an immaculate pinstriped suit. Dr. Winters hissed as she caught sight of him, but the man's answering smile was warm and predatory. Dear sister, what is this? Is the holiday season not a time for visiting one's family? Considering the last time I saw you was when you tricked me into helping you with a troublesome ghost, I don't think I want to see you. The warden of Stragview rolled his eyes. Such dramatics. Our kind taught this rabble about misleading. What made you think we were immune to it? Winter tossed her head and walked on, Marguerite hot on her heels. And you, the warden said, you must be that old mountain man from the little fracas last year. Good to finally meet you. I wish I could say the same, Grandpa said, his voice sounding stony. You must be the big bug I've always felt around the prison. It's the reason I never go anywhere near it. The warden was smiling, but his eyes did not reflect it. Grandpa had struck a nerve. Go on ahead, Grandpa said after a few seconds had passed. I'd just as soon not have you at my back. The warden shrugged, walking towards the water as easily as he must walk the grounds of his compound. I had never met the man. He did not usually accompany his inmates to the hospital, but it appeared that Grandpa knew him. Marcus bent down and whispered something to Grandpa, and the old man made a non-committal noise before heading in behind him. Glimmer took Marcus's offered arm, and I followed in the back of the group as we approached the lady. She smiled as she saw Grandpa, but I stopped as the warden walked past her and suddenly disappeared. He was there one moment, and then poof, he was just gone the next. It was a little confusing, but as I stumbled after the pair, I assumed that all would be explained. Tales of fae traps I had seen on TikTok begun to go through my head, but if there was a group of people you probably didn't want to trap, it was likely these guys. Magus, you and your apprentice be welcome, the lady said, spreading her arms wide. Who are your guests? Grandpa turned to indicate me. This is my friend, John, and this is my apprentice's intended, the moon elf, Glimmer. Lovely, the lady said, shaking Glimmer's hand. And John, be welcome and accept safe passage and the protection of my house as you enter Fae. I bowed, feeling a little nervous about the whole entering Fae thing. We walked towards the same place where the warden had vanished, and as we stepped through the space, we were suddenly within a shimmering space in full bloom. We had stepped from a winter wonderland to a snowy garden full of plants that I was pretty sure weren't supposed to grow this time of year. The people here were, well, they were fantastic. Glimmer was beautiful, but these people were unearthly. They were like living statues, set to eat and drink and mingle. I saw some of Glimmer's people mingling amongst them as well, and they seemed poor copies of the much more beautiful Fae. They hovered around the tables, eating snacks and drinking from glass chalices, but even so, there was a clear division between them. These are, Grandpa said, sounding amazed. The Fae courts, the lady said, as she and her advisor stepped in behind us. They are being less than social, though. Why the hell would you invite both of them? Grandpa said. Seems like a bad idea. Well, Titania is my patron, and one does not simply snub Queen Mab. I did not believe she would accept, honestly. She never has before, and I had no reason to believe that this time would be any different. Dr. Winters was mingling with a small group of fairies in green armor, laughing and swirling her wine as they talked about something. The warden was standing by the refreshment table, but it appeared that
he did not share her outgoing nature. He sipped his wine and looked like he wasn't really sure why he had come. The group of fairies, dressed in dark blue and purple, were giving him a wide berth, and I suspected that Gramps had the right of him. Whatever he was, I wasn't the only one that could feel it. The lady raised her wine glass, something that had materialized from nowhere, and struck the side to bring out a long, high note. The guests looked up, raising their own glasses, and I was a little surprised to find that I had one too. It had just appeared in my hand. Gosh, like magic. And when she smiled at us, it felt like a summer breeze in July. I want to welcome all of you to my winter celebration. It isn't something I do often, but I feel it is good to stand in the face of your adversaries and revel in such attention. I am proud to welcome not only my queen and her court, but our friends of the Winter Court, as well as Queen Mab. A tall woman with a wash of dark hair raised her glass in salute. She was on a whole other level. Her dress looked to be made of ice at the heart of a glacier, and her feet covered in boots of living midnight. She was the statue that had been the base for the rest of her people, all beautiful angles and hauntingly pale skin. But I didn't need to look at her with my sight to know that that was something she wore for polite company. If I were to see her for what she truly was, it would probably melt my brain or send me to the loony bin, and I looked away from her with real effort. So I invite you to mingle, to rejoice, and take all this night to put aside your differences, to Yuletide, she said, lifting her glass, and to new friends. They all repeated the sentiment and drank, as did we, and when no other toasts were called, the mingling continued. The lady lowered her glass, looking unsure as she took a sip. I had hoped for a more spirited response. "It is summer and winter, my lady," one of the advisors said, the goatier of the three, who appeared to have a stole of green piping. "They will never hold more than tentative bonds." "I suppose," she said, turning back to Grandpa and our group. "This is Tobias, my head botanist. Randy, I believe you know, and our new diplomat to the court, Samuel." All of them traded grips with Grandpa and Marcus, the brandy low and the blues saying it was fine to just call him Sam. "It's strange," Marcus said. "I never thought to get your name before now." Sam shrugged. "We were a little preoccupied the last time. We had reason to be together." "Very true. Squashing pumpkin heads and fending off green knights."
Huh? Seems like everyone's invited to this battle except for me.
Marcus shook his head. "I told you, Glim, it wasn't something we set out to do." The two of them started in on a story of this war of winter that they had all been a part of, Glimmer hanging on to him as though hearing a lot of this for the first time. And Grandpa and I decided to head to the snack table. I hadn't eaten lunch. I was pretty excited, and when Grandpa loaded a plate from the overflowing platters, I figured it was probably safe to do the same. I guessed that they probably wouldn't be so overt as to try to trap us with food, and found most of it to be pretty tasty.
"You feeling anything, kiddo?" Grandpa asked.
I swallowed the honeydew melon I had been eating and shook my head as I looked around the gathering. "Nothing out of the ordinary, I guess, which I guess is something. This place is like the hospital. There's just so much energy around here that it's hard to tell what's weird and what's not." Grandpa nodded.
"The Fae are like that. Glimmer even has her own low-level current, but you're so surrounded by major energy that it probably is being lost. You'll get used to it, kid. It takes some practice."
I looked around at the devastatingly beautiful creatures that milled about and stared daggers at each other, and shook my head. "Is it always like this?" Grandpa laughed, spraying crumbs.
"Yeah, no, kid, it's not always this peaceful. Most times there's a buggin' of some kind or a shag nasty of another that needs blasting into pieces."
A little girl came running up then and gave Grandpa a big hug,
Merry Yule, sir. It's good to see you again. Grandpa smiled and tousled her hair. And you, my lady. A woman, a moon elf, I was pretty sure, moved up behind the girl in a long and elegant dress. Grandpa bowed, as best he could, with the little girl hugging him, and I did the same. It was always a good rule of thumb to bow to the people that Grandpa showed deference to. My queen, Happy Yule. Oh, stop that, she said. You are an honored guest amongst my people, Magus, and your apprentice is all but family. Grandpa smiled and straightened. I wish I could have been there to see it. We hope you will someday, the queen said. We would be honored to host you. Grandpa smiled and returned, but it was twinged with sadness. I, too, would like that, but I do not know if it will ever be. They wished him a merry Yule, and then they went back to mingling. Who was that? I asked. That is the queen of the Moon Elves, and her daughter, Princess Gabriella. You just know everybody, don't you? I asked with a laugh. Grandpa winked. Never doubt it, kid. So, we spent the evening by the snack table. Eventually, Marcus and two of the ladies' attendants wandered over with Glimmer, and we made our own little circle. Dr. Winters and her partner joined us at some point, but the warden seemed to have struck up a conversation with some of the Winter Fae, and thankfully did not join us. When our hostess came over, Tobias in tow, she looked flustered and a little disheartened. It seems that none of them will mingle. Titania told me it would likely be this way, but I had hoped that maybe they would warm a little as the night went on. It seemed that is not to be, though. Such is the way of our kind, my lady, said a voice from behind her. We all turned to find the painfully beautiful Queen of Winter standing a few feet away, flanked by attendants. Your Majesty, the lady said, bowing, I trust my party is to your liking. Most enjoyable for a winter affair. I need to speak with you on a matter of some importance. The lady nodded. I'm honored that you would seek my counsel. Hold your honor. You haven't heard the request yet. There is a member of my court who wishes to parley. This member wishes to come under a banner of peace so that they may negotiate with you. I felt something then, a tingling along my spine like a winter chill. And who would this individual be? The lady asked, her demeanor turning icy. Before I tell you, I would like an assurance of safe conduct. This individual is worried that you might react badly to them if they came to speak with you alone. The lady glanced at her advisors. The one in the red stole just shrugged before sighing and pulling her lower lip into her mouth. As long as I have their assurance of safe conduct as well. Queen Mab nodded. I will grant that. Do you agree to parley? I will, the lady said, looking around as if to ensure she had a crowd watching. She clearly didn't want to meet this person by herself. Queen Mab glanced back at the space where we had all come in through, and the cold in the area intensified. I saw many of the plants begin to wither and die. Her three attendants gathered around her, and I saw Marcus and Grandpa edge a little closer to Glimmer as she drew the same knife that I had seen her threaten the ghost girl with. Dr. Winters and her friends seemed ready themselves, and to my surprise, even the warden moved a little closer to our group. Through the portal, materializing like a mirage, came someone I had only heard about in stories. He ducked a little as he came through, and he had thankfully not ridden his horse. He was unarmed, but it hardly mattered. He could have crushed most of us easy enough, and the snow that fell on his green armor began to stick. He was an imposing figure, to be sure, and there was little in the way of humanity about him. He was strangely expressive for someone in a helmet, and I could almost see his metal face mask grin. My lady, I see you recovered from your injuries." The lip came out of her mouth, her teeth coming together in a snarl. "You have some nerve coming here. What possible reason could you have for coming into my domain to threaten me?" "Threaten? Oh no, my lady. I have not come to threaten. I have come to offer you the one thing I know you desire most." "And what might that be?" The helmeted head seemed to grin again as he hissed out the last thing I had ever expected. "Peace."